Welcome to River of Life Online. Today we continue in our chapter, Habits of Love, as we learn the way of Jesus together. Well, welcome to River of Life Online. My name is Brent Hudson. If you didn't know that already, I'm the pastor here at River of Life. For those of you who are regulars at River of Life, good morning. Glad to have you here. Why don't you just give a shout out in the chat, just say hello to one another. It's not the same, of course, as doing it in real life, but yet, hey, here we are, and let's make the best of it. So use the chat, encourage one another, share your heart with one another in the chat. That's what it's there for, and I look forward to participating in that myself during the breaks and the pauses in our service today. Before we go further into our service, as far as announcements go, it's pretty much standard. Nothing's happening during coronavirus. Everything's happening online. You can look at our Facebook page there for any updates or announcements there, and in our Facebook group you can look for announcements or any kinds of needs that will be listed there. So please pay attention to those social media feeds to find out what's going on with us. Anything that would be impacting us in a public way would be noted on our public page, which you don't need to actually be a part of Facebook to grab that and take a look at that. And of course, if you are on Facebook and a part of our local community, by all means, I hope you're a member of our private Facebook group, which is for people who are meeting in person at River of Life before all of this pandemic stuff started. So those are the main ways to connect with us. In terms of giving, we are taking offerings online through Canada Helps. You can just search for River of Life Mennonite Brethren from CanadaHelps.org, and that will direct you to our page, and you can donate there. And we thank all those who have been faithful over this pandemic, going on almost a year in March, and it's just a bit of sadness waves over us when we hear that. But yeah, we are moving forward and continuing on, and I want to thank all those who have been faithful during this time. Let's pray together. God, be with us now as we continue to meet virtually today. Bless us, fill us with your Spirit, forgive us our sins, and help us to see you. Help us to learn from you. Help us to know the way of Jesus. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. All right, let's go into our teaching time.
Today we continue our chapter, Habits of Love, and last week we looked at 2 habits: 3 times a day, move your body and pray, and then the weekly habit of spending an hour talking with a friend. As we continue along in our habits, I think it's important to at least address this issue that may come up of resistance, that sometimes we resist on acting on anything that has to do with creating habits in our lives. And while that may seem like a bit of a struggle, I think that even that can be turned around into something helpful, because it gives us a moment to think through the why of why we're resisting or our resistance. I mean, if we're Jesus followers, then we really need to ask the question, why don't we want to talk to Jesus a few times a day, or to modify that into some way that we can intentionally integrate prayer into our lives? What is it in us that resists building into our relationship with our Savior, Jesus Christ? And likewise, in terms of reaching out to a friend, what is it in us that resists, that causes us to resist reaching out to a friend and spending some quality time in conversation? Creating habits in our lives is really the deep work in our souls. It's the thing that's actually going to change us in the right direction. It's what Eugene Peterson called a long obedience in the same direction. It's something that we all need to do, whether we feel like it or not. So even if you're maybe struggling with doing any of the stuff that we're talking about in this chapter, I would just challenge you to think about the habit and the principle behind the habit, and look to creative ways that you can integrate these into your life. Your soul will thank you. Jesus has much work to do in all of us. And so this week we're moving on and looking at 2 new habits of love. And as you know, we're following along Justin Earley's book. And the way he lays out his book is he deals with 4 daily habits, and then he deals with 4 weekly habits. And we're sort of mixing that up a bit so that every week we have a daily habit and a weekly habit to integrate into our lives. At the end of this chapter, we will have all 8 built in and built up within us. Now, I think I should just mention quickly that as we do this chapter, the idea is to build on. So we're on a new week now, and we're going to talk about 2 new habits, but that doesn't mean you can toss the other ones away as if they weren't important anymore. That was last week's habit. No, these are incremental growth steps for us. We're adding a couple of new habits each week. So at the end, we will have these 8 new habits, 4 daily and 4 weekly habits built into our lives. We need to see these habits as similar to taking medicine for some medical condition that we have. We need to do these for the sake of our soul. All of us in this world that is fallen and broken have souls that are in urgent need of care. And this is the medicine that will get us well, that will draw us closer to our God and to this life that we want to have of loving God with our entire being and our neighbors as ourselves. So let's get to these new habits this week. The daily habit, the first one I want to talk about, is to have a meal with someone else. The beauty of some of these habits is that many of us are already doing them. It's not really hard to integrate into our lives because it's something you're already doing. The thing that we want to talk about in terms of if you're already doing this is to do them with intentionality, to do them understanding why you're doing them, to look deep and to understand that what is being accomplished by you adding this into your life. This mindfulness about our lives and what we're doing in any given moment actually propels us forward in a good direction. We see that intentionality in the life of Jesus. He didn't just go willy-nilly everywhere and anywhere. He had a plan with how he spent his time. And much of Jesus' time was spent around tables of friends and disciples, of people who invited him in. And sometimes Jesus didn't even wait for an invitation in. We know the well-known story of Zacchaeus, where Jesus looks up at Zacchaeus and says, "Come on down from that tree, Zacchaeus. I'm going to your house for lunch." Jesus didn't mind inviting himself in certain situations. But the meal, the table, was an important piece of ancient life. And it's also an important piece of our modern life as well. Let's look to a story from Mark's gospel that talks about one of these occasions where Jesus shared a meal with some new friends. Reading from Mark chapter 2. Then Jesus went out to the lakeshore again and taught the crowds that were coming to him. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at his tax collector's booth. "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Levi got up and followed him. Later, Levi invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many other tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. There were many people of this kind among Jesus' followers. But when the teachers of religious law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with tax collectors and other sinners, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with such scum?" When Jesus heard this, he told them, "Healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners." The communal understanding of meals and food in the Bible is quite profound. It's quite different from our modern focus on nutritional science. It was more about people and building into people's lives and sharing in each other's lives. Justin Earley, in his book, makes the point that the need to eat reveals our dependence on God. In fact, every time we sit down at the table, we're reminded of our dependency on God, yes, but also in the finer things, everything. All the people who were involved in the process of getting that food to our table, we're dependent on them. I've planted enough gardens to know that I would starve to death if it was dependent on me to grow my own food. I'm dependent on the farmer to develop a product, whether it be livestock or produce, to get that ready for market. I'm dependent on the transportation system that brings that to the packaging plant. I'm dependent on that plant to get everything put into nice packages that can be preserved well in grocery stores. And I'm dependent once again on that whole infrastructure of grocery store workers. It's no wonder that in our pandemic, all of these people are considered to be essential workers. Without them, there's no food on our tables. And without food, we all die. It's essential. And just as our lives are dependent on food, that dependency reminds us of how we depend on each other. We need each other. Meals at the table remind us that we are dependent on food, we are dependent on others, we are dependent on God Himself. And the deliberate routine of having a meal with someone else every day helps us develop relationships with others that go all the way back to Abraham entertaining angels unaware. Our table is shared with family, absolutely, but it's also shared with those developing friendships with people around us, like in the story with Jesus. Jesus didn't wait to become good friends with people before he shared a meal with them. In fact, it was the meal that helped him develop those friendships. We need to have the same approach to our tables as well. It is one of the few places where we can gather together and we can learn and listen and talk and discuss and make new friends. Now, maybe we're limited now in the midst of these COVID times, but this time won't last forever, and we need to build habits into our lives that allow us to continue going forward in a healthy way. We need to practice this discipline, this habit now with our family, with our friends, with those who are available, so that we, when the time comes, are open, ready, and willing to have newcomers come to our table to share in friendship and to share in the gospel of Jesus Christ. We are made so that we have this need for one another. And the table reminds us of that need, not just in terms of producing the stuff on the table, but just in terms of living in community. We need other people, and we need God. In fact, there's an internal logic here when God says the greatest commandments are to love Him with our whole being and to love others as ourselves, because we need God and we need others. These are, in many ways, greatest commandments that actually nurture and nourish our souls. And we need to bring this more and more into our lives. Now, it may be that you're in a situation where this is really difficult. Maybe you're single, maybe you're widowed, you're alone. It's just not going to be possible for you to have a meal every day with someone else. Well, again, we go back to this idea of intentionality. We go back to this idea of what is the principle that we're trying to create. And is there some creative way that you can integrate something like this into your daily routine? But again, even if it's not possible within our present situation, particularly as we're now in the red phase, look to the future. Build habits into your life now. If there's one thing that the pandemic has taught us, is that virtual connections, although they're not as good as in-person connections, are infinitely better than no connection at all. And we can use the technology around us. We can do a FaceTime or a Google call, a Duo call. We can use Zoom or Teams or whatever other technologies around us. We can just pick up the phone and put it on speaker and have a meal with a friend as we talk. I don't know how many times my wife and I have sat at our kitchen table with the speakerphone on, talking to one of our kids as we ate a meal together and as they were driving or doing something else. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's actually a beautiful thing. The thing is, sometimes those things happen accidentally. What we're saying is that we need to have intention and create habits in our lives that actually sees the value in that and then goes forward and builds that into our lives. Now, the second habit, the weekly habit this week, is a bit more nuanced than this last one. And while we're following Justin Earley's book for this series, as Dave Morehouse and myself work through the material, sometimes we sort of get caught on how concrete and clear Justin Earley is in how he makes these habits, and sometimes forgets to maybe talk about the principle behind the habit. And what we want to do, particularly in these times where we're dealing with pandemic, and we need to maybe rethink these habits in light of that, we want to talk about the good principles that these habits are based on. And so while Justin Earley says for his weekly habit to curate media to 4 hours a week, we thought, well, first of all, it would take us 20 minutes just to explain what that meant. And so we went with this idea: discern the good and determine the limits with media. Because at the end of the day, I think that's what Justin Earley is trying to get to. The idea that we need to discern what is good and what we are letting in to our lives through our eyes, into our minds and our hearts and our souls. And we need to determine the limits of how much of that gets in. For this, we found this passage that we looked at last summer from Philippians in our Beautiful Things series, because it really speaks to this idea. Let me read from Philippians chapter 4. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all you learned and received from me, everything you heard from me and saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you. And so this principle that we see here at work in Justin Earley's book and also in Paul in his letter to the Philippians, it serves as a reminder for us that we are vulnerable people. We are people who are shaped and moved and our direction is shifted by what we entertain in ourselves. What is shaping us? And we need to be honest about the media as well. I know that in his book, he's thinking mostly of YouTube and TV and all of that stuff. But I want to just say that books, paper books, they're a technology too. They're a media too. I mean, can you think of anything that's more isolating as a technology than reading a book? I mean, we do it in solitary situation. We can lose track of all sense of time if it's a great story. I mean, really, we can escape reality in that situation. We can avoid chores, we can avoid conversations, we can avoid life itself in a good book. Now, are books bad? Of course not. Books are fantastic. And is YouTube bad because it can take up all your time and suck you in? No, of course not. But we have to be the masters here. We have to be the ones that say what is good to watch, what is good to take in, and how much of it is good to take in. What are the limits that I need to put on my time? It was Benjamin Franklin who said, time is what life is made of. And that's the very reason why we need to be discerning in this area of our lives. The writer of Proverbs says, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. And Paul in Philippians 4:7 says that the peace of God will guard our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. There's a sense in which guarding our hearts and minds is something which is very important in the biblical message. And the fact is, the world has no interest in guarding your heart. Typically, the world has an interest in selling you something. And I'm not against that per se, but I do think that we each need to take responsibility for the messages we subject ourselves to when we can control that. And it becomes part of a discipline. Now, Justin Earley says we need to curate. He uses the word curate. It's as if an art gallery, right? You've got innumerable pieces of art that you could show, but you only have limited space. And so you have to pick out what's best for the occasion. And so do we as we look to the media world. There is so much more media out there than we could ever take in. And so we need to ask ourselves the question, what is good to take in and how much of it is necessary? Justin Earley talks about curating for beauty and for justice and for community. And that's great. That actually is pretty specific. Paul just says it's true and honorable, right, pure, lovely, and admirable. Think about those things. And so while it's a little bit different, Paul is doing the same thing as Earley, and he's saying that we need to set up our minds as a filter for what gets into our heart. And we need to use wisdom to do this, both in what gets in and how much gets in. Now, the fact is that, whereas Earley says 4 hours a week, well, we need to figure that out for ourselves. Nobody can tell you this, that, or the other thing. You need to figure out for yourself. You need to do the deep dive into your own life and ask yourself the question. And certainly during COVID times, our use of media is going to be a little expansive since we're kind of not able to do much else. In fact, we can use media as a way to build connections with people. And so we need to be flexible and we need to be wise as we integrate these habits into our lives. But we do need to limit ourselves. We live in a world of infinite choices of media, but yet finite resources of time. And so we need to be wise. Earley points out with respect to Eden and Calvary, he says, we, for our own sake, tried to become limitless, and the world was ruined. Jesus, for our sake, became limited, and the world was saved. Limiting how much time we take in with media and discerning what is good and true and beautiful is a habit that we need to engage in this week and every week for the sake of our souls. All of these habits of love are incremental steps in building spiritual muscle and strength. It's like hitting the gym for your spiritual life. A life that is focused on loving God with our whole being and loving our neighbor as ourselves. A life that is built up and strengthened by habits of love.
So after our message was done, Dave and I had an opportunity to, at a distance, talk about the topics of today's message, and let's go to that now.
Welcome back to this time of conversation and sort of ongoing discussion around our message today. Again, I want to welcome all of you who are part of our Journey family and the River of Life community. And so, Brent, here we are. We're now, you could say, into the grind. Right now, we're into the next stages of helping people think about these habits of love. Actually, I just want to sort of jump and get your thoughts about this, right, as we begin in these next few minutes. First of all, I'm wondering for those people who are already watching this, and it's just week 2, and we've already highlighted 4 habits, 2 dailies and 2 weeklies, that already they're saying, oh man, I'm feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
What do we say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, I like what we were talking a little bit just before we turned the cameras on about, for instance, today we talked about meals and food. And I mean, it's something we're already doing.
That's right.
We eat, right? That's what we do. And so the question then is, how do we just shape that and move that a little bit in the direction of it becoming a deliberate, intentional habit that builds relationships? So it's taking what we're already doing and just shaping it into something that works for us right now. Likewise with prayer, the people who are like you mentioned last week when we were talking about, 3 times, they're tired just thinking about 3 times. But the prayer part they want to do. And so how can they incorporate the principle behind what we were talking about and Justin Early is talking about so that it can become a routine in their own lives? So I totally get that it is a lot of stuff. If you're starting from zero, it's a lot. But I think that the mistake is thinking that we're starting from zero, because often we're already doing a lot of this stuff, and it's just a matter of shaping it and building it into a routine that leads us in this direction that we want to go. So that would be how I would sort of first kick at the can on that one anyway.
Well, and you had said a phrase earlier that I liked, that it was that sometimes the adjustments are just micro adjustments initially.
Yes.
And maybe from the micro, we move into more macro adjustments or more major adjustments. But again, it does take effort, though. These habits do take effort.
Absolutely.
And that is part of our spiritual formation as we learn to love, right? One other thing really quick is that you and I both touched on this in our message, but it's this idea that what if I have to, after I try this for a few weeks, I just go, I don't want to pray.
Yeah.
Or, you know what, I don't want to talk to a friend for an hour a week. Or, I don't want to eat a meal with people.
Right.
What I think is interesting is rather than feeling bad about that, actually see that as actually you're digging down now into real, what I think, spiritual formation in your life. Because now you're finally addressing, you're getting to see in real time the issue that maybe's what is stirring around inside there that you really have to let God do his work in your heart.
Yes.
And the habits are sort of a catalyst or a trigger to that deeper work that needs to happen.
It cracks the egg, right?
It
cracks
does.
that shell, and yeah, it is. That's true. I mean, there is something within us. I think every one of us, and I think the story in Genesis 3 sort of gets at that we don't like being told what to do, and we don't like creating any kind of rule that we can actually now measure how we're doing. And it's just easier not to have a rule and then think that we're doing fine. And so yeah, I think that it is work. It's hard work, and all the excitement we have in the beginning sometimes can fade away when it halfway through. But that's where I do think we learn a lot about ourselves and our motivations to do things. And I think we need to be gracious to ourselves too.
Absolutely.
And because we can put huge burdens on ourselves, and then we fail, and we quit, right? Whereas we need to, if something's too hard, we need to lighten it a bit, and we need to make sure that we're moving, because just quitting and throwing everything off and saying I'm done, doesn't get us where we want to go.
Right.
So I think grace in all of this, because that's something we don't often talk about when we talk about habits. It seems more law, but I do think that if we're going to deal with ourselves and our struggles, then we also need to lather on some grace as we move through these things.
So really quick, probably the one part of this week that we were looking at, and we were thinking about, for those especially who are buying the book, Common Rule. What's it called? The Common Rule?
Habits of Purpose for an Age of Distraction.
Right, by Justin Early.
Yep.
And again, we encourage people to get that book, and it's a great resource because we're using it. But we were kind of disagreeing with Justin a little bit, especially around his weekly habit of curate your media down to 4 hours a week.
Right.
And we were struggling with people trying to think, how do I do that when media is so invasive in so many ways, from social media to, just to all the other.
Well, it's even integrated into our work.
Yes.
So how do we separate media that we're taking in for work and media that we're learning how to fix a leaky faucet, or does that count? And so there's a lot of nitty gritty with respect to that. Makes it really hard to follow such a concrete, clear rule. Now, I'm not against having a concrete, clear, objective for ourselves, but
Yeah,
it's just
I
that we
agree- I
have to
agree
be the
too.
ones that
Yes,
set that, I
that's
think.
right.
Yeah.
But I think that what I actually did appreciate about this idea of discerning is, and I'll say it again, is that I think that we do have to ask, if we look at our own heart or mind as walls of a museum,
Yes.
what are we hanging on those walls?
That's right.
Because those will shape us.
Are the most beautiful things on the wall.
Yeah.
Or the things that tell the story that we want it to tell. Are we in control? I guess is the bottom line. Are we the ones making the decisions about those things, or is it just happening like a whirlwind around us?
And just getting pulled along.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And one final area. Let's just talk about meals for a second. I find it fascinating to realize that for some families, I think about younger families, of making the table still a priority every day for their family. And I'll just say now, as an older dad, who's all their children have grown up and are now off making their families and doing all that good stuff, I would want to say that is probably one of the most important things to do. Make that table your center of gravity for your home on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And one other thing, I'll do a quick shout out, and I didn't get your response, but it is a place too to make new friendships, not just have people you know.
That's right.
But to break our cliques, so to speak,
That's
and
right.
to welcome new people in.
Yeah, it's healthy for us to understand that every great friendship we have right now started off being awkward and just getting to know somebody. And it was time and energy and effort that grew that into something that we cherish later on. And so you got to take those risks and open up your space to allow new friendships to develop so that they can become those things for both yourself and for them. I mean, it can actually save a person's life, befriending them. And the table is a great, non-threatening way to really invite someone in and to see your life and you to see them. And just to start that process of developing a friendship. So absolutely.
So having a meal with someone every day and on a weekly basis, discerning the good and determining the limits of our media makes all the difference. So again, we hope you enjoyed this conversation. See you next week.
Bye now.
Well, thank you for joining us here at River of Life Online. If you're a part of our local congregation, look for that link to a Zoom call. That'll be coming momentarily. And for all of us, it is my prayer that God would bless us and keep us, and that He would truly shine upon us with His light and give us His peace. God be with you all. Amen. Relevant, practical, authentic. River of Life.